Born in 1879 to pious parents, the child was named Venkataraman. Aside from several auspicious indications surrounding his birth, there were few specific signs that the young boy's destiny would take a spiritual turn. When he was only 16 years old, attending high school in the city of Madurai, in the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu, he had a remarkable experience of death, which led to a permanent awakening to the deathless spirit. Arriving at the sacred, whether the body was engaged in talking, reading, or anything else, I was still centered on I. The young man's life was completely changed. No longer interested in worldly things, he secretly left home for the sacred hill Arunachala, which had reverberated in his consciousness some months earlier. The story begins. For a few people began to gather around the young sage, seeking his guidance. Perhaps it was simply the fulfillment of bodily karma, or the motiveless compassion that reacted to the desire for guidance on the part of those sincere seekers. But something seemed to draw him back to a fuller bodily life. Slowly, seekers would approach him to have a doubt cleared, or to simply sit in his peaceful presence. Shiva Prakasham Pillai was one of the early visitors who became captivated by the young sage. The teachings on self-inquiry as given to Shiva Prakasham Pillai became the key message of the maharshi. The great Sanskrit scholar and ascetic Vasishtha Ganapati Muni had mastered a broad range of scriptures, disciplines, and meditation practices. Feeling frustrated that he had not progressed further in experience, Ganapati remembered the young sage living on the hill and approached him with great emotion, desiring to know the true meaning of tapas, or spiritual practice. The young sage gazed at him silently for a while, and then replied, "If one watches whence the notion I arises, the mind is absorbed into that. That is tapas. When a mantra is repeated, if one watches the source from which the mantra sound is produced, the mind is absorbed in that. That is tapas." This response on the part of the young ascetic filled Ganapati Muni with joy, and he declared that Venkataraman should now be known as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. Hearing the word Arunachala, Venkataraman spontaneously exclaimed, "What? From Arunachala? Where is that?" The surprised relative explained that Arunachala is the same place as Tiruvannamalai, the small hamlet that has been both a religious center and home to saints and sages over the centuries. It is very rare for one to realize his true nature in a spontaneous and almost effortless manner. But one day, a sudden and intense fear of death gripped the consciousness of Venkataraman, who outwardly was like any other normal, healthy 16-year-old boy. The shock of the fear of death drove his mind inward, and he felt that he must face his own mortality. Venkataraman lay down upon the floor and began to visualize and dramatize death. He held his breath.
Not an empty formula. It is more than the repetition of a sacred syllable. If the inquiry, "Who am I?" were a mere mental questioning, it would not be of much value. Self-inquiry consists not in orally repeating I, but in searching by means of a deeply introverted mind, wherefrom the I springs. To think, I am not this, or I am that, may be of help in the inquiry, but cannot be the true inquiry. Self-inquiry can reveal the truth that neither the ego nor the mind really exists, and enable one to realize the pure, undifferentiated being of the self, or the absolute.
Questioner: how is the mind to dive into the heart? Maharshi: the mind now sees itself diversified as the universe. If the diversity is not manifest, it remains in its own essence. That is the heart. Entering the heart means remaining without distractions. The heart is the only reality. The mind is only a transient phase. To remain as oneself is to enter the heart. Self-surrender is the same as self-knowledge, and either of them implies self-control. Surrender can take effect only when it is done with full knowledge as to what real surrender means. Such knowledge comes after inquiry and reflection and ends invariably in self-surrender. Surrender is to give oneself up to the original cause of one's being. Do not delude yourself by imagining such a source to be some God outside of you.
Investigate what the mind is, and it will disappear. There is no such thing as mind apart from thought. There is no use removing doubts. If we clear one doubt, another arises, and there will be no end of doubts. All doubts will cease only when the doubter and his source have been found. Seek for the source of the doubter, and you will find that he is really non-existent. Doubter ceasing, doubts will cease. When the mind gets absorbed in the heart, the ego I, which is the center of the multitude of thoughts, vanishes, and pure consciousness, or the self, which subsists during all the states of the mind, alone remains resplendent. It is this state, where there is not the slightest trace of the I thought, that is the true being of oneself. It is the undifferentiated light of pure consciousness into which the reflected light of the mind is completely absorbed.
He need not gain anything new. He must only give up his false ideas and useless accretions. Instead of doing it, he tries to catch hold of something strange and mysterious, because he believes that his happiness lies elsewhere. You impose limitations on your true nature of infinite being, and then weep that you are but a finite creature. Then you take up this or that practice to transcend the non-existent limitations. But if your practice itself assumes the existence of the limitations, how can it help you to transcend them?
In after every downfall and breakdown. Gradually the obstacles are all overcome, and your current becomes stronger. Everything comes right in the end. Steady determination is what is required. It is no doubt said in some books that one should go on cultivating one good quality after another, and thus prepare for liberation. But for those who follow the path of self-inquiry, Their effort is itself quite enough for acquiring all good qualities. They need not do anything else. Questioner: how is one to realize the self? Maharshi: by overcoming mental habits. Questioner: how to overcome the mental habits? Maharshi: by realizing the self. Questioner: that is a vicious circle. Maharshi: it is the ego which raises such difficulties, creating obstacles, and then suffers from the perplexity of apparent paradoxes. Find out who makes the inquiries, and the self will be found.